Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, creating bathrooms for daily rejuvenation. More at callmosby.com.
From the St. Louis Public Radio Newsroom, this is The Gateway. It's Tuesday, February 25th. I'm Abby Larico. Across the world are these special libraries full of dry plants. Scientists say they're essential to helping understand climate change, but their future is far from certain.
I feel like we're always just on the brink of disaster, of major herbaria closing, but fortunately it hasn't happened yet.
The fight to protect herbaria coming up after this news on The Gateway. A former St. Louis sheriff's deputy is suing Sheriff Alfred Montgomery for defamation following a statement released over the weekend purporting to explain the circumstances around that deputy's firing. STLPR's Chad Davis reports.
Tony Kirchner says the sheriff's statement had a number of false claims, including allegations that the deputy showed signs of emotional distress when faced with termination. Kirchner also accused the sheriff of lying about a January incident when Montgomery instructed him to roll a pair of gold dice for a chance to keep his job. Montgomery said this weekend that they were trick dice used to empower Kirchner. Brandy Barth is Kirchner's lawyer.
We intend on making this man accountable for his actions, which continue not just towards my client, but to many, many other people.
Montgomery's office declined to comment. A spokesperson said last week that Kirchner was also terminated for campaigning in uniform and other reasons. I'm Chad Davis, St. Louis Public Radio.
The CEO of a local real estate development agency has dropped out of the race for St. Louis Public Schools Board of Education. With the departure of Robert Mason, 11 candidates are now running to fill 3 seats on the board, which oversees the city's public schools. Mason is a lifelong resident of St. Louis and says he hopes to continue to give back to the community through his philanthropy instead of governance. The election will be held April 8th. Missourians will have to wait a little longer to bet on sporting events without crossing state lines. St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum reports what's behind the delay, likely until later this year.
Missourians narrowly legalized sports betting last year. And as part of that initiative, it stated that the Missouri Gaming Commission could issue emergency rules that jumpstart sports wagering. But Secretary of State Denny Hoskins rejected the emergency rules, contending that the Gaming Commission couldn't prove that there was an urgent need to have them in place. A spokeswoman for Hoskins says the Gaming Commission can submit rules through the normal process, which likely means that sports betting won't start in earnest until the fall. Under the amendment, Missourians will be able to bet at casinos, at certain sports venues, and through 2 mobile betting apps such as FanDuel or DraftKings. I'm Jason Rosenbaum, St. Louis Public Radio.
Former Illinois Governor Jim Edgar announced in a statement yesterday that he is battling pancreatic cancer. According to CBS News, the 78-year-old says the cancer has spread and he and his wife are, quote, facing a new significant challenge. The Republican served as Illinois governor from 1991 until 1999. Prior to that, he served as Illinois Secretary of State for nearly a decade. The United States Supreme Court has declined to take up a high-profile case that could have affected so-called bubble zone ordinances around abortion clinics. St. Louis Public Radio's Sarah Fenton reports the case stems from a 2023 Carbondale ordinance that required demonstrators to stay 100 feet away from medical facilities.
Carbondale's city council has since repealed the bubble law keeping demonstrators away from abortion clinics. The Supreme Court's decision to decline the case means other similar bubble laws can still stand in other cities. The St. Louis-based group Coalition Life in 2023 sued the city of Carbondale to strike down the ordinance, claiming it violated anti-abortion demonstrators' freedom of speech. Lower courts upheld the Carbondale bubble law. Coalition Life Executive Director Brian Westbrook says he's disappointed the Supreme Court didn't take up the case.
And the lower courts cannot overrule many of these ordinances because the Supreme Court has not spoken on these things.
The city in Southern Illinois has 3 clinics that provide abortions. I'm Sarah Fenton, St. Louis Public Radio.
The Trump administration is withholding tens of millions of dollars in federal funds previously earmarked to deal with legacy coal mines across Illinois, including in the Metro East. Abandoned coal mines pose a safety risk and can leach harmful toxins into the environment. Amanda Pancaw is with Prairie Rivers Network. She says there are abandoned minelands in over 60 Illinois counties.
The southern two-thirds of our state have experienced coal mining at some point in the past, and these sites are really spread across the state.
The federal government has frozen approximately $75 million for the remediation effort. It's also cut funding for a similar program to plug abandoned oil and gas wells. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says he thinks Democrats lost last November, in part because they focused on the wrong issue. Alex Stegman reports.
Pritzker spoke extensively with MSNBC host Jen Psaki on her podcast, The Blueprint. The potential 2028 presidential contender thinks Democrats correctly warned that democracy was under threat, but
democracy being challenged or being at risk isn't something people can even imagine. So, in my view, it was a terrible message, even though it clearly was being challenged, and we're seeing the results of that now.
Pritzker says Democrats need to be really clear about, quote, the things that matter, like affordable groceries, health care, and higher education. He also thinks Democrats align with most of the country on big-ticket items, like raising the federal minimum wage higher than $7.25 an hour. I'm Alex Stegman.
At institutions around the world, there are special libraries containing millions of plants. They're called herbaria. As scientists work to understand and adapt to climate change, these plant collections have become even more important. But in some places, their future is in question. St. Louis Public Radio's Kate Grumke reports on why scientists want you to care about herbaria.
Matthew Austin twists a huge gear at the end of a large gray library stack style shelf in a room filled with many more just like it. This is the herbarium at the Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis. It's one of the largest collections of dried plant specimens in the world. The tall compactors slide open, revealing shelves on either side filled with hundreds of manila folders.
Okay, Sanguinaria canadensis.
Austin flips through pages with dried plants stuck to them and reads the labels.
One with no flowers from March 24th, 1935. One with flowers from March 22nd, 1894.
Austin is a curator of biodiversity data here. Like many scientists, he knows that climate change is affecting when flowers bloom, sometimes throwing them off by weeks.
We know that flowering is highly controlled by temperature. The herbarium struck me as a really powerful tool to addressing this.
The changes Austin found are something that other scientists are finding in herbaria elsewhere. They say these plant libraries are essential for understanding the crises the planet faces, like biodiversity loss and climate change. But many are worried about the health of these institutions. Early last year, an announcement sent waves through the botany community. Duke University planned to get rid of its herbarium. Kathleen Pryor is its director.
I was called into the dean's office and told that herbarium was dead.
There was a real uproar from the scientific community. Scientists condemned the decision in journals. More than 20,000 signatures on a Change.org petition asked the university to reconsider.
The outrage was very remarkable, and I think it stunned the Duke administration into silence.
A year later, Pryor says it's still not clear what's going to happen. The news was a warning shot heard throughout the herbaria community, says Barbara Tiers, director emerita of the New York Botanical Garden Herbarium. Tiers tracks the number of herbaria around the world. Overall, they're doing okay. But she says it's shocking that an herbarium as big as Duke is on the chopping block.
It felt like a slap in the face at a time when we are all trying so hard to document biodiversity and to understand it as we face the environmental challenges that we're facing.
Tiers says each collection is vulnerable to the whims of its institution. At a time when federal funding for education and research is in question, she's worried.
I feel like we're always just on the brink of disaster, of major herbaria closing, but fortunately it hasn't happened yet.
Smaller herbaria have closed. and the orphaned plants had to be taken in by other collections. Lynn Clark is the director of Iowa State University's herbarium, which has grown in recent decades. About 20 years ago, it took in the University of Iowa's collection.
So we grew 50% kind of overnight.
Then in the last 2 years, they got the University of Northern Iowa's herbarium.
It's important to make sure that all of these are taken care of. Not that we like to see herbaria closing, but we can't just let them be mothballed either.
At herbaria across the country, scientists are racing to digitize all of this information so they can learn about the ecosystems we might lose before it's too late. I'm Kate Grumke, St. Louis Public Radio.
That story was produced in conjunction with Harvest Public Media, a collaboration of public media newsrooms in the Midwest and Great Plains, including STLPR. The Gateway is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, a listener-supported service of the University of Missouri-St. Louis. Theme music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Abby Larico, and from the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, this has been The Gateway.